Hey, baseball lovers. Appreciate you guys tuning in for another episode of the RAB podcast. Wanted to give you kind of a quick update here. Bruce, who is usually with us as part of our trio, he has been super busy and had some stuff going on. So he recorded a segment with his take on the LCSs and a look ahead at the World Series. So I'm going to intro that first, and then you'll see our regular recording after that with me and Nico discussing the same subjects. And just want to take a second and thank you all for listening or watching on YouTube. Thank you for supporting the Facebook page, our groups that we have, our subscribers. If you're one of our subscribers on the page, thank you. If you subscribe to our YouTube channel, thank you. Appreciate your support. Please continue to listen and watch and share with family and friends. And don't forget to check out our merchandise at tpublic.com. You can go there and search Romantic About Baseball, and we have a wide selection now with a few team specific items for October as well and for the World Series. So thank you guys, and we'll be seeing you soon at the ballpark. Here is Bruce's take on the LCSs and the World Series, followed by me and Nico giving our take during a discussion, and we'll see you soon.
You have to look at who did what in what context. Let's talk about the ALCS a little bit, where the Blue Jays and the Mariners just fought and beat each other up for 7 really exciting games. Moving into the World Series, though, the Blue Jays have to be concerned with how they match up against the Dodgers. So I think that we're concerned about the obvious people in the Blue Jays lineup, right? So we're concerned about Vladimir Guerrero Jr., who really showed that he's got it in the postseason. He stepped up to the plate, and he hit all the home runs that you'd expect him to do. 6 home runs over the DS and the CS. He had what is that 12 RBIs. So obviously, Vlad is going to be somebody that the Dodgers need to be concerned with. Absolutely. The other guy in the lineup they really need to be concerned with, and maybe even more so, is George Springer. Springer's got all this postseason experience that he's bringing to the table, and I think that if the Dodgers overlook that, they might be sorry here and there. Because you're looking at Springer, who obviously had that big Game 7 home run, but that was one of 3 that he hit in the ALCS. And I think that has to have some legs to it. That has to be something that they absolutely pay attention to in LA. So when we're going to talk about pitching in a minute, but when we think about the Dodgers pitching, which has been so good in the postseason, we have to think about the guys they don't want to pitch to. And they don't want to pitch to Vlad Guerrero, and they don't want to pitch to George Springer. If they can get around those 2 guys, the rest of the lineup starts to get a little more pedestrian. Ernie Clement had a big series in the division series against the Yankees, hitting 643, big home run. His OPS was 1.554. So Ernie Clement was definitely stepping up, and he even hit 321 in ALCS with an 809 OPS. So you want to watch Ernie, but I'm not scared of Ernie Clement. I mean, is anyone scared of pitching to Ernie Clement? If you are, you might want to reconsider your stuff. You can get around Ernie Clement. If you want to look at this Blue Jays lineup and look at somebody who might be someone who surprises you, who's an outlier and could hurt you, and you're not really sure and what you want to do, Dalton Varsho might be that guy. I might look at Dalton Varsho and go, well, I definitely don't want him on base. He put up a 1.471 OPS in the ALDS. Is that more about Dalton Varsho, or is that more about the Yankees' Swiss cheese-like pitching? I would lean towards the second one, and then take the next step forward and say that I'm not super scared of this Toronto Blue Jays lineup. But I'd also say that they are dangerous, right? They can explode at any time, and they can just be huge in the moment. They can be huge in the moment. George Springer's win probability of adding 24% to the possibility of winning all by himself. You really have to look at it and say, okay, again, Guerrero, again, Springer, these are guys you don't want to face in a critical situation. if we flip the script here and move over to the Dodgers offense and look at it and talk about who we don't want to pitch to when we think about the Los Angeles Dodgers, well, unfortunately, that list is pretty long. We're looking obviously at Shohei Ohtani, who has been, what's the right word, very quiet in the postseason this year, except for one game. But that one game was pretty huge. I mean, Shohei really showed up for that game, and you know he can do it. A lot of people criticize the Phillies for walking Ohtani in that situation, but it was the right thing to do. Now, walking in the run after that, maybe less so. But Shohei Ohtani is not a guy you pitch to in a situation where if he swings the bat, he can win the game. You don't want to do that. And so Shohei is a guy you really have to watch out for. But then there's, Mookie Betts. And then there's Freddie Freeman. And then there's Teoscar Hernandez. And then there's Max Muncy. I mean, the list just keeps going with how good the Dodgers or not necessarily how good. Good might be the wrong word. How deep the Dodgers lineup is with guys who can win the game with the swing of the bat. And the Blue Jays just don't have that. They just don't match up in the same way. Now, all of that being said, what we've seen with the Dodgers even last year in the postseason, and they're repeating again this year, is they are just good enough to beat you. The Dodgers-Brewers matchup, it was a mismatch from the get-go. I mean, everybody should have known that if the Dodgers showed up, this wasn't going to be a series, and it wasn't. It was actually probably one of the most boring playoff series that I've watched myself. We all know that the Phillies-Dodgers was the real NLCS here, and the Phillies probably would have walked over the Brewers too. But at the end of the day, the offenses don't match up really great. I'm picking the Dodgers offense over the Blue Jays every single time. When you match up the top guys, Vlad versus Shohei, I'm still putting my money on Shohei, but I wouldn't bet against Vlad either. But if I had to pick, that's who I would pick. And then after that, George Springer, against who? Freddie Freeman, is he your second best, or is it Mookie Betts? I mean, I'm still picking Betts. I'm picking Freeman over Springer 9 times out of 10. And then after that, there's just no comparison offensively. And the reason this is so important is because, again, how good the Dodgers pitching has been. If you look at the guys, now we're going to talk about Tyler Glasnow. We're going to talk about Shohei Ohtani. We're going to talk about Blake Snell. Those three guys, let's see, they gave up 0 runs. Yeah, they gave up 0 runs, these guys. The starting pitching for the Dodgers has been so good. And okay, you want to talk about Yoshinobu Yamamoto? He did have one sketchy start, but then he had a great start where he gave up a leadoff homer in the Jackson Churio. Again, the starting pitching for the Dodgers has been so good that when you look at the amount of runs that they get in the NLCS, the 0 runs is just incredible. Even when you're talking about a lackluster Brewers offense. Now the Phillies tagged him up a little bit. Shohei got hit up by the Phillies. They certainly found him and scored a few runs. Similarly, Yamamoto, the Phillies, got to him a little bit too. But at the end of the day, this pitching staff is deep. This pitching staff is elite. And more importantly, most of this pitching staff is rested. These guys between Ohtani, Glasnow, Snell, they didn't pile up the innings this year. They're way fresher than the Blue Jays. When you look at the Blue Jays pitching, you start to be nervous for them. Trey Yesovich has come on and become a highlight in this rotation without question. Kevin Gausman was very good. Are you going to get another start like that from Max Scherzer against that Dodgers offense? I don't know. I can't say. I wouldn't put my money on it. And the only place that the Blue Jays really start to mount an attack, pitching versus pitching, is in the bullpen. But even at that, Jeff Hoffman was very good in the NLCS. But do you trust Hoffman to be the guy to close a 1-run game against the Dodgers offense? I don't necessarily trust Sasaki anymore, but at the end of the day, I think it's a wash with the bullpens. The Dodgers starting pitching is better than the Blue Jays starting pitching. The Dodgers hitting is better than the Blue Jays hitting. I'm gonna pick for my pick to win the World Series, the Dodgers, and I'm gonna pick them in 5 games. They're not gonna sweep. The Blue Jays have fight, they have heart, they have hustle, they have soul, and they can surprise you. But it's just not going to be enough against this extremely talented and extremely deep LA Dodgers team.
All right, so Bruce gave us his takes. He's going Dodgers in 5. And so, good analysis there from Bruce as usual. We call him the closer for a reason. He's really good at taking these series and breaking them down. So thank you, Bruce, for contributing your look at the upcoming World Series. So now we will go to the regularly recorded segment that we have for you between me and Nico as we give our takes on those same subjects. So here you go. Give us your thoughts, just kind of overall on Dodgers Brewers and how that played out.
Hey, Jason. I picked Milwaukee. I laugh about it now because, I don't know. I think I wasn't the only one, right? I think a lot of people had some optimism that we might see a fairy tale ending for the Brewers, but I think very interesting. Milwaukee was 6-0 against LA coming into this postseason. I think a lot of people looked at that and said, "Hey, this might be the Dodgers' kryptonite." Couldn't have been the case, any less the case. It quite frankly didn't matter. I thought that Milwaukee not being able to kind of steal that first game when they had an opportunity to, kind of just derailed them. I know some of Pat Murphy's comments after the series was over that, I don't want to say they were making excuses, but they were saying that, the Cubs series was overwhelming for them. And, there was a lot of emotions when they beat the Cubbies. I'm not really sure. I think Pat it got to a point where he didn't know what to say anymore as to why Milwaukee was dropping the ball so much against the Dodgers. I mean, I think it's really simple. I think the Dodgers are just a far superior team. They've gotten healthy at the right time. When you throw out Blake Snell, Yamamoto, Shohei, and Tyler Glasnow, I mean, that's tough. I mean, that's as tough as you're going to face. I know we know on our last show, we talked about maybe some vulnerabilities for the Dodgers was that bullpen, right? And we're talking the guy's not named Sasaki. Well, we didn't really see him at all.
Yeah.
It was a complete domination from starting pitching. That pretty much was the series. Milwaukee could not, it sounds sort of cynical, but they couldn't hit the ball. They couldn't do anything outside of a couple of first inning home runs from Jackson Churio and, guys like Christian Yelich and Bryce Terang and Contreras were essentially completely non-existent. And as much as Milwaukee tried to pitch their way to stay into these games, there was no hope. And you kind of felt that when you're watching the game. You said to yourself, I just don't think Milwaukee can win a game here. And they ended up getting swept. It draws a big story as far as, Milwaukee's obviously a small market team. I think they're like 22nd or 23rd in the payroll as opposed to the Dodgers and being number 1 or number 2. I'm not sure if they're number 1 or number 2. I think the Mets might be 1.
I think the Mets are first.
Yeah. But either or, it sort of tells you, if you're Milwaukee, why didn't you, be more aggressive at the trade deadline? We know you don't spend a lot of money. But this was a very disappointing moment for the Brew Crew and their fans. And I hate to say it, Jason, but like you get to a point with Milwaukee, but it's like, such a terrific regular season, but almost nothing to show for it in the postseason. And that's sort of the disappointment with Milwaukee. I'm not sure how you look at it, but obviously the Dodgers are a behemoth and we're going to get to them as far as playing Toronto, but really disappointing that Milwaukee couldn't even win a game in this series.
Yeah, I've got a lot of big picture thoughts. So there were not a lot of singular moments when you have a sweep. Obviously, Game 4, Ohtani's performance, whatever adjective you want to use for it, legendary, amazing. I will say this, just to play devil's advocate, it wasn't look, what he did was unbelievable. We haven't seen this kind of combination of pitching and hitting and since Babe Ruth, quite frankly. But and we haven't seen it at all at our age. But I also think it. I hate to say it was overblown a little bit. It was game 4 of a sweep. You know, if he does this in game 6 of a 3-2 series or game 7, you know, that ratchets it up. But I don't put it up there with a Mazeroski home run or Joe Carter home run, something like that. It was a great performance by Ohtani. So that's one thing. But big picture, going back to something you said about, you know, it was talked about a lot. The Brewers had won the season series 6-0 against the Dodgers. The Dodgers throughout the season had injuries to their pitching staff here and there, and people wondered, will they be able to get it together for the playoffs? I think it's a really good example of the regular season, the games, they matter in the standings, but it doesn't matter if one team wins 6 and the other. It just doesn't matter when you get to October. And 2, it's such a long season. I mean, what were we talking about back in April and May? Like, it was completely different narratives than what we end up talking about now. Like myself, I thought Toronto was a dark horse to be a playoff team, but we weren't talking about Toronto as the world as the AL champion back even in June, July. So I think it's a long season, and we've got to start looking at it that way, especially with the current playoff system where, you know, anything kind of happens when we get here. And the Dodgers, despite those injuries, since most of those guys are back, it almost benefits them. Those guys saved their arms. They didn't pitch as many innings as they would have pitched. And now you got fresh arms in the playoffs. And you're right. They looked unstoppable. It was like the Brewers were a little league team, you know, playing a college team is what it looked like. Now, some of that's on the Brewers. I think we saw some really terrible at bats. I don't think they adjusted. They didn't adjust to just trying to put the ball in play. And that's the Brewers game.
Right.
And then other big picture, you mentioned this, you know, yeah, it's a disappointment. The great position the Brewers management has put themselves in, though, is the fans, they look at themselves as the underdogs because they're a small market team. And so the fans are like, hey, look, we won the division again. We won the LDS. We got to the championship series. Yes, the championship series was a disaster, but hey, it's the Dodgers. They're the defending champs. They're the juggernaut. So I think Brewers fans, I don't know many Brewers fans. I haven't really seen them responding much on the page lately, but I feel like a lot of Brewers fans are like, hey, this was a good season. This was a successful season. But at some point, and this will go for the discussion we're about to have on the ALCS too with the Mariners, at some point you got to get over that hump. You've got to not say this is a success. And even as a small market club, what do we have to do to take that next step and get to the World Series? Because frankly, I don't think any team should go as long as the Brewers have gone. The Mariners have gone. You've got to figure out a way. The Tampa Bay Rays have been in 2 World Series, Nico. Tampa Rays, the Colorado Rockies have been in a World Series. At some point, Brewers, Mariners, you got to get together. We were this close, you know, to having that series that we talked about during the final months. Didn't quite happen there. But that's my overall thoughts on the National League. I don't think there's a whole lot more to say there.
Yeah, and I think big takeaway from the Dodgers regular season versus the Dodgers in the playoffs. I don't want to say the Dodgers didn't care about the regular season, but so many of the pundits were talking about, you know, how great this Dodgers team was. They can win 105, 107 games. They might break a record for the most wins in regular season history. And I agree with them because you're seeing the kind of the final product now. You know, you're seeing this is the Dodgers that we expected right now. They've lost 1 game in the postseason, Jason. 1.
Yeah.
You know, again, take Milwaukee and Cincinnati. You know, I understand they're not the most talented teams, but, you know, they even handled Philly, you know, relatively easily, you know, and that's just really impressive. And Shohei Ohtani, like you mentioned, that big game he had was his first kind of breakout game of the postseason. So this team can hit you from so many different ways. And when you have their starting pitchers going 6, 7 innings, shoot Yamamoto through a complete game, just very, very difficult to deal with. If you're Toronto, you got your hands full. And like I said, this Dodgers team, this is what we expected all season. And I think right now they're healthy and they're just, I don't know. It's just they're just a one level above the next team, I think, at this time.
It appears that way. They, to your point, that the Philly series I thought would be the one that challenged them, but they kind of steamrolled the Phillies. They did lose the one game, but yeah, they look amazing right now. We'll get back to that when we talk World Series. But if this was the Dodgers team we had all regular season, then they might very well have challenged the regular season win record.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, let's talk American League. Much more interesting. You yourself are a Seattle fan. I was caught. I was definitely pulling for the Mariners just because I wanted to see that first time appearance. It was nothing against the Blue Jays. So if I get any hate from our Blue Jays fans, I've been on the Blue Jays bandwagon most of the season, picked them as a dark horse playoff team. So I'm not anti Blue Jay, but I really wanted to see that one team that's left that hasn't made it to the big show. So I was pulling for them. It was a great series. As a fan, is not a fan of either team, just watching it, having a rooting interest, but not a fan. It was great theater. It was great cinema. It was wonderful to see it go 7 games. As a fan, however, as someone who waited to see those Mariners get to the World Series, give us your thoughts around the American League Championship Series and just your thoughts and feelings. This is romantic about baseball, so you get to talk about your feelings about it. Tell us what you thought about the series and where the Mariners are at now.
Well, you got an hour or 2 hours, Jason?
This is therapy right here. Okay?
Yeah. This is
baseball
cool.
therapy.
Like you said, I am a Mariners fan. It's not easy. It takes a true romantic to be a Mariners fan. Let me just tell you.
I hear you.
But it was a fun season. It was, one thing I'll say, man, is that you watching this team, Cal and Julio and Gino Suarez and Polanco, just a really likable group from the outside looking in, and the way these guys grinded, especially in the second half of the season, and how much they cared. And, as a fan, you felt like you were part of the team for a period of time. It was a blast following these guys. It was a great run, Now that I've had some time to digest it, I can sort of accept it and look forward to the future. But this series, man, incredible series. I think if you're a fan of either team, you are obviously not enjoying it as much. I think if you're a neutral fan, you probably loved it. And, the theater that came with games 1 through 7. Look, Seattle went into Toronto, stole both first games. Nobody saw that coming. The bats were hot. They pitched well. Maybe Toronto was a little bit, they obviously had that break after the Yankee series. Games 3 and 4, Toronto took the momentum back. This series is all about momentum, man. Seattle had it, then Toronto had it, and then Seattle took it again for a moment in Game 5. Obviously, the grand slam from Suarez, win that game 6-2. And then obviously you go back to Toronto and you say to yourself as a Mariner, you say, well, we got to win one game in Toronto. We did it twice. We can win one game. We can look at so many parts of this series and nitpick, players and pitching. I thought both teams played really well. I know that kind of sounds silly, but both teams had great pitching moments and great hitting moments. But the overwhelming theme in this series that I think made the difference, Toronto's lineup 1 through 9 just wears you down.
Yeah.
They did it against the Yankees in sort of emphatic fashion, obviously a shorter series. And man, when you look at what they did to the Yankees, that was impressive. And then when they played against the Mariners, look, the Mariners are a really good team, right? I think a lot of people expected that they were a World Series contender. This was, they had terrific staff, really good lineup. But the difference between the two teams was Seattle's hitting outside of those main guys was, putrid. It really was. A lot of swing and miss. A lot of guys were very streaky. Rosarino was very inconsistent. I know our boy Rivas, the guy, that 28-year-old who played in AAA until his later 20s, just games 6 and 7, very poor at bats.
Yeah.
Very, very poor at bats. And you look at the other side, and you got guys in the Jays lineup outside of Vladdy, who's having obviously an amazing postseason. You got guys like Barger and Varsho and Clement and Lucas, guys that the average baseball fan hasn't even heard of.
Right.
But these guys put up incredible at bats. You know, almost every at bat, these guys are putting the ball in play. They just wear you down, man. The Blue Jays just wear you down. They did it to the Yankees. They did it to the Mariners over 7 games. They're a gritty team. They're doing it without Bo Bichette, right? He's going to be back for the World Series, from what I understand.
Yes.
Anthony Santander, the guy that they signed last winter, that was supposed to be one of their big bats. He hasn't really played. He's not playing now. He's out for the rest of the postseason.
Yeah.
This has kind of just been a magical run for Toronto, and I kind of liken them to the 2019 Nationals a little bit. Sort of a surprise team, not a household name. Sort of haven't done it in a long time. I know the Nationals did it. They're an expansion team. So yeah, man, I think the Jays just wore them out. We can break down that Game 7, bottom of the 7th, if you want to, Jason. I don't know if you want to dive into that situation with Springer. It's up to you. I'll let you go and give your thoughts on that. But like I said, for me, the big difference in the series was 1 through 9 Jays hitters more competitive at bats, top to bottom.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. Everything you said is exactly right. One of the things I was high on with the Jays, the reason I was high on them being a dark horse, was their lineup and their ability to hit the ball, put the ball in play. They really hadn't put all that together in the last few seasons, but I think, sometimes we are I say we, really the media is so quick to jump on the big time performers who don't show up in the postseason. Aaron Judge obviously been the subject of a lot of, negativity. We got to stand up and applaud Vladimir Guerrero Jr. because this guy has shown up. He's put the team on his back. To your point, he didn't really have to. He's getting a lot of support from that lineup. I think the Jays got a shot. We'll get to that in a minute, but I think they got a shot in the World Series because of the depth of that lineup. The Dodgers have depth too, obviously. But yeah, that Jays lineup, man, I kept seeing those guys, to your point, like, okay, so this is probably an easy out for Seattle here. But then, Lucas would lace a single in the right field. And you're like, okay, that was not an easy out at all. And it just became this thing where you're like, who's the next Jay that's going to get the big hit? And the Mariners, to your point, it was really carried by Raleigh, Rodriguez. Of course, Suarez had the big hit in Game 5. Let's talk about it real quick. Game 7, of course, the Mariners have a 3-1 lead. Springer comes up, 2 men on. They change pitchers. I'm not a big we all like to play armchair quarterback or armchair manager. I feel like managers are put in situations where whichever decision they make, if it goes well, they're going to get credit. And if it goes badly, they're going to get blamed. So if he left, who was pitching at the time? Was it Kirby was in the game?
Woo
was in. If he leaves Woo in and Woo gives up the homer, then he's an idiot for taking him out or for not taking him out. Right. He takes him out. The next pitcher comes in, gives up the homer. Now he's an idiot for making the change. Maybe the pitcher choice wasn't right. I'll get your thoughts on that. You know the team better than I do. And I know the pitch selection was poor. We were talking about that before we started recording. Right over the plate in a hitter's count. If it was mislocated, that's one thing. If that's the pitch he intended to throw, then he got what he deserved. I'll say that because Springer was right on it. So let's get your thoughts as a Mariners fan. What were your thoughts on those choices?
So look, obviously Game 7, right? It's all hands on deck. This is for the Mariners. This is history is on the line, right? You've never been to a World Series. You're on the doorstep of a World Series berth. Forget about winning it. Forget about trying to beat the Dodgers.
Yeah.
As an organization, just getting to the World Series is a monumental achievement for a franchise that has been incredibly snake bitten. So I have a couple issues in regards to Dan Wilson's strategy in this game. And I agree with you, Jason. The managers get so much scrutiny and so much credit kind of foolishly either way.
Yeah.
I again, Aaron Boone's an example, right? I mean, he wins 94 games and somehow he sucks. It's like, I don't think he sucks. Maybe he's not great. He might not be Joe Torre, but he's still, I think, a damn good manager, right? I don't think it's unreasonable to say Aaron Boone's a good manager.
You're only saying that because Bruce isn't on the recording today.
No, I think he's a good manager, but nonetheless, look, George Kirby was pitching a good game. Okay, he gave you 4 quality innings. He obviously had that first inning where he gave up a run, right? he pulled him after 4, right? He wanted to put Wu in there. Let the kid pitch. Let him go. If he, once he gets into trouble and the batting order sees him for the 3rd time and guys are starting to connect, and give the kid a leash. One of my biggest pet peeves with baseball, especially in the postseason, is they're so quick to go to the pen.
Yeah.
That's why I know the Brewers didn't do anything, but like I respected them letting Snell and Yamamoto go. Just let them go.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They're rested, they're healthy. Let them go. Let them pitch.
Yeah.
So, anyways, he obviously went to Brian Wu in the 5th inning, and Wu, obviously he had an injury come into the postseason, so he wasn't as sharp. I think if you watch the game, Jason, you can see he wasn't as sharp. He wasn't hitting his spots as well.
Yeah.
But he's been your best pitcher all season. He's your ace as far as your start.